We're very excited. Today is the our webinar from the Franchise Leadership Council. I am the chair. The topic today is called "The Death of Demographics: A Conversation of Real Inclusion." I'm joined by Patty Rother, who is the vice chair of the Pride Council and the incoming full chair. This is my last webinar as chair, and so it's been a wonderful ride. I'm excited to pass the baton. But today, we're not going to talk about us. We're going to talk about David Allison. David is the founder of the Value Graphic Research Company. David is a keynote speaker, an author. I've read his books. I would definitely recommend that others do too. The Death of Demographics is the one that I've just finished up. Um, but today we're going to talk. Patty and I had this great opportunity. David keynoted the Feggery Drinker Franchise Summit this summer, and literally we were elbowing each other to be the first one to get to talk to him, just say, we want you to be on this wonderful webinar this fall. Both of us were incredibly impressed with this just reshaping and rethinking of demographics and values. And, franchise systems, as we all know, are dependent on personal relationships, franchisees, franchisors, and our customers. But how we understand people's decisions, people's behaviors is changing and evolving. And David is going to spend the next, 25 minutes talking about his research and understanding on how values play into this equation. And then we are going to have just an open session for the second half of the webinar. So we beg all of you to engage, listen, but then the chat is wide open. Put your questions in. David Smith is going to be managing those. And then we're going to take the second half of this hour-long webinar to just have David Allison answer some of these questions and just dive deeper into the values and demographic arena. So, Patty, do you have anything that you want to add? You're going to wrap all of this up with us, but
I will. I'm just excited to hear from David. So let's hand it off. You can introduce yourself further, but we'd love to have just a mini session on what the heck the death of demographics is, how it all came about, and your incredible research that you've done with over 1 million people.
Thank you. You guys have been pumping my tires. I'm feeling like a rock star. It's fantastic. Thank you for that. What a great way to begin. I'm super glad to be here. My first interaction with the franchise world was at the Feggery Drinker Franchise Summit, and I got to meet a bunch of really, really cool people. I've decided I like the franchise folks. You guys have all got some really wonderful ways of interacting with each other. It really does feel, I mean, we all talk about, and there's people in the human resources sector who talk about how we shouldn't refer to family. It's not a family at work. It's not, but it really did feel kind of like a family to me. Everybody kind of knew each other and they were making space for each other, and it was a really great place to be. So that's wonderful. And then to be able to connect with all of you who are focused on this subset of interests within the organization and within the sector is even better. You know, as a gay man myself and a member of the Indigenous community here in Canada as well, everything we can do to support each other and to move forward in better, faster, more productive and inclusive ways is a good thing as far as I'm concerned. So I maybe start just by talking a little bit about demographics because it's what we're all familiar with. We tend to look at people. We have a couple tools to do that. Demographics is the primary one. Whether we're talking about our customers, our prospects, our employees, the folks who, anybody, we just all walk around every day kind of thinking about people based on what we can see, who they are on the outside, and things like gender, income, marital status, number of kids, educate, all the demographic labels we're all very, very familiar with. But my company has done 1 million surveys around the world and talked to 1 million people about who they really are on the inside and what makes them tick and what their values are, what's important to them. And what we now know from doing all that work is that if you look at people inside any demographic category, any one of those labels, they're only about 10%. It's actually 10.5% on average similar to each other. So whenever somebody starts talking about Gen Z, they're all like, "This not, no, they're not. They're about 10.5% similar to each other. Some women are about 10.5% similar to each other. It's an average, but they're all really, really low. In fact, the highest level of cohesion that we found after a million surveys around the world is with a particular income category in the Middle East. It got as high as 15% similar to each other. So that's the most similar possible, is about 15% similar. So what it means is if you flip that number around, if you are going through your work and your life thinking about people using demographics as a way to try and understand them and deliver on programs, services, messages, whatever it is you're trying to do, you're using data that's roughly 90% flawed. Now, you think about the money and the time and the resources that you spend in your organization trying to get people to do the things you need them to do and behave the ways you want them to behave, and you're using data that's 90% flawed, it just doesn't sound really very efficient, does it? Demographics, in fact, are really, really good at telling us what people are. We still need to be able to put a fence around a group of people and say, here's who we're talking about today. But they only tell us what they are, not who they are on the inside. And that's what we got to get to if we want to truly understand people. Let me make this point abundantly clear this way. So much so much time being spent trying to understand Gen Z, because they're some kind of strange unicorn in the enchanted forest, apparently. They're unlike anything we've ever seen before, except for Gen X. And it's every time a new generation pops along, we all get excited and try and figure out what they're all about. But if you look at the stats, depending on who you're paying attention to, Gen Z is roughly 30% of the population of the United States right now. That's like 100 million people. And you're trying to tell me that they're all the same on anything? There's 100 million of them. How could that even possibly be plausible? And yet we all sit in our boardrooms and say, "Whoa, we're trying to attract more Gen Z, and here's what Gen Z is all about." It just doesn't make any sense. So instead, what's the solution? It's easy to poke holes in things, but the way you really need to understand who people are and how they decide to show up in the world and how to inspire them and engage them and motivate them, and yes, sometimes influence them if that's what we're trying to do, is to understand their values. And here's why. Inside our brain, there's neurological processes that are triggered when you make decisions that are aligned with your values. And there's other processes that are triggered that when you make decisions where you're not aligned with your values. So think about it in terms of the workplace. We've all had that job. Unfortunately, most of us have lived through that job where it was just not the right fit. That was not the right job for me. My values were not in alignment with that job. And you felt awful going to work every day. You felt a lot of fear and anxiety and stress. And that's your brain saying, you know what, buddy, you're in the wrong spot. You should not be here. You need to go and find somewhere where you've got a little bit more values alignment. And that's the place where you're going to feel good. Your brain rewards you when you choose things that are aligned with your values by giving you a little bit of dopamine. And we all know how important and powerful dopamine is. So it's the only way human brains know how to operate in the world. Human brains look at everything, every decision we make. I read a stat the other day that we make 35,000 decisions a day. And that every one of those decisions is based on, subconsciously or consciously, which option lines up better with my values. And it's because we keep getting rewarded with that dopamine hit. So we don't want to stop. So understand what people's values are instead of whether they're male or female, rich or poor, young or old, black or white, gay or straight. If you understand what their values are, you understand what's really driving them, and you can start to really understand what makes these folks tick. And regardless of what it is you're trying to get them to do, now you have the information, the accurate data that you need to understand how to make them, get them to do the things you want them to do. The other thing to note about values is that they're incredibly hardwired and stable. You get your values when you're very young, and they don't change. It's usually late childhood, early adolescence, a little bit different for everybody, but whoever the most influential people are, the most influential experiences you're having during that period that sociologists refer to as socialization, during that period of your human development, your values are locked and loaded, and they're yours for the rest of your life. Now, some people say, but that's impossible. My values are different now than when I was back in school. Your values haven't changed. Your behaviors as a result of those values, those change all the time based on where you are in your life stages and environmental conditions and whatever's going on around you in a particular context, behaviors change on a whim, which is why mapping people against behaviors is sometimes a bit of a fool's errand. It's as bad as mapping it against demographics because they're always changing. But values are consistent. And that means they're a very reliable way to try and understand people. The way that you use values data to influence customers today, or to engage with a workforce today, or to choose your next franchisee today, those same values will apply next year and the year after, and 10 years from now and 20 years from now. So you don't have to keep constantly thinking about people in a different way. Uh, we're having a little pre-call yesterday with Patty and Paul and talking about examples of where things just don't make sense in the franchise world. And one of the examples that Paul brought up is with Wild Birds Unlimited. Sometimes stores in smaller markets outperform stores in bigger markets. Doesn't make any sense. What's going on there? Well, what's going on there is for some reason, whatever set of reasons are in play, this smaller market franchisee has done a better job of connecting with the values of the people in that particular community. So they're spending more, they're more loyal, they're coming back more often, they're doing all those sorts of things that are going to make it a more successful organization than the one over here that's kind of just swimming around and not really entirely understanding what's triggering folks. Some of that's going to be on the franchisee, and some of it's just going to be the market itself. Like the folks in this particular community could be very, very aligned with what the brand already stands for in terms of values, and the folks in this community less so. So there's all kinds of reasons why this will be happening, but I can tell you that one thing is true. It's always going to be about values because everything is. Every decision we make as humans is about our values. So anything that's going on that involves people behaving in one way or another, it's going to trace back to some set of values that are either in alignment and people are feeling good about things, or out of alignment and they're feeling not good about things. It's everything. This is the answer. It's the answer to everything, folks. I bet you didn't think you were going to get that when you logged onto a webinar today. So what else can I give you? We're going to have all sorts of time for more questions, but I wanted to give you a couple of takeaways to think about. The first one is a set of 3 questions that you can use. We call them the 3 telltale questions. And if you ask whoever it is you're trying to understand these 3 questions, you can use these in a networking environment where you're just trying to get to know people. Let's say you're trying to decide, you've got 2 franchisees you're thinking about, they're both equally qualified on all other levels, and now you're just trying to determine which is the right fit for the org. These are good questions to bring up in a casual way, maybe when you're having a dinner or something during the selection process. If you find a way to put these into surveys that go out to the workforce for all of the people working at all the franchisees, that'd be another way to. So use these in any setting. And the trick is you have to really listen to what people say because they're going to have different ways of answering these questions. So the first question is, why do you go to work? Seems fairly simple. But remember, we're trying to figure out what's the driver behind a behavior. So a big behavior is going to work every day for 7, 8, 9, 10 hours, whatever it might be, for 5, 6, 7 days a week, whatever it might be. So if you can get down to why are you doing that, then that's going to be a story about values. It might be about that's where my friends are. I feel like I'm part of something bigger than me. I feel like I'm making a difference in the world. I'm just paying my bills. I want my family to have a better life than I had when I was growing up. I have big goals and aspirations and ambitions. I want to end up being the president and CEO of this organization. People will start to tell you why they're doing this thing, this behavior called going to work, and that will be about a value. So that's a good clue. Second question, you just won the lottery. Well, why would you give away half? Now, there's always going to be some smartass who says, well, I wouldn't. You go, yeah, okay, you're hilarious. But if you were going to give away half, why would you be doing that? Not who would you give it to, but why? What's the motivating factor that would make you say, I am going to give away half of this money? And the third one is my favorite question. This one works great with your friends. Invite your friends over for dinner, pour a couple of glasses of Cabernet Sauvignon down their throat, and then pop this question out and see what happens around the table. You'll learn a lot about your friends. So this one is, you get to say one thing to yourself from 10 years ago, your 10 years ago self. What's that one thing that you would say? And why that thing? It's almost the why that thing is almost more important than what would you say to yourself from 10 years ago. So some people will say something about, buy stock in XYZ corporations. Like, okay, cool, but why? Why is that the thing you would say? If that's honestly your answer and you're not just trying to be funny, why, of all the things you would want yourself to know from 10 years ago, why that thing? So you're just trying to get down to pull away the whys, just keep going deeper and say, well, why that? Why that? Why that? And eventually you'll get to a place where there's no more why questions you can ask and you're out of value. And if you just like, let's say it's your employees that you're doing this with. Um, you get to listen to what everybody has to say about this stuff. You'll see trends. You'll see that a whole bunch of your employees are answering that first question about why do I go to work in a way that's about feeling like they're part of something bigger than themselves. And so that's your clue. Now you can go, okay, that's what's driving folks who come to work here. So we should lean into that and make it even more apparent that this is a thing that's bigger than just yourself, and that all those kinds of belonging and community values are the ones that you're started creating your workplace culture and your employee engagement policies around, and it's there. So find out those values and then use those as jumping off points to start solving whatever the issue is you're trying to solve. And the last thing I'll bring up, and then I'll start yabbering, is uh, DEI. It's here in Canada, we're still talking about it openly. Other parts of the world, I know it's not a thing that we're talking about so openly anymore. But I have an interesting take on that can help because it's about realizing that there is, throughout the course of human history, nothing has ever been resolved by doubling down on what makes us different. Nothing. The first thing we have to do if we're going to solve any kind of problems together is to be able to find some common ground. We have to be able to see ourselves in each other. And that's going to be about values. Values do not know what color your skin is, whether you're gay or straight, or whether you're young or old, or whether you're indigenous or non-indigenous, or whether you're anything. Values don't know that stuff. Your values are agnostic to all of those. So values are a place where you can find similarities between all the different folks who work inside an organization or customers of an organization and say, okay, despite our outward differences, these are the things we have in common. And let's start by seeing that in each other. And if we can see that in each other, we can see ourselves reflected back at us. Well, now we can hold hands and we can say, okay, cool. Now that we sort of see what we all have in common, we have this common ground, let's go solve that problem together. Because that's not a problem that should be there. Because why, if we're all so similar to each other, well, why are you having a problem with that thing? And you folks are having a problem with that thing. But you're not going to be able to do that until you find that common connective tissue. And that's going to always be about what's on the inside, not what we can see on the outside. Uh, in many ways, demographics divide us. They push us apart. And values and value graphics, they bring us together. And the more of us who can start thinking about each other based on those things we have in common, the faster we'll be able to combat some of the issues like ageism and racism and sexism and homophobia and these sorts of things that are still, whether we're talking about them openly or not, they're still endemic and there's still issues inside all of our organizations. So it kind of feels to me like values could be camouflage for that. It can be a way for us to talk about this openly without talking about it openly and finding ourselves running afoul of the things we're supposed to talk about these days. I think that's it. I mean, I've kind of rambled away there for a bunch, and I hope I've probably caused more questions than answers, but I think it's a good introduction.
I love it. And Michelle asked a really great question about using the three questions. I noted them and I put them in the chat so everyone can remember what they are. But for those three questions, because they do seem really personal or something that you would be able to ask one-on-one, how do you use that, or at least the premise of those questions, with a big group of customers or a big group of franchise, owner prospects, and really get to the bottom of their own set of values so you can align those with your marketing campaigns or kind of the way that you speak about your own company?
Yeah. Well, the first thing to realize is that asking those three questions is a really ham-fisted way of figuring out what someone's values are. So if you're going to go spend a bunch of money based on what you get from asking people three questions, just that's the disclaimer, right? This is not the most accurate thing in the world. It's a start. It's something. Because here's what we tend to do with customer surveys in particular. We ask demographic questions. How old are you? Or which gender do you are? Like all those demographic things. But then what are you going to do with that? You find out that you're 73% female in the folks that you've surveyed, and then you just jump to demographic stereotypes about what women like. I mean, what else are you going to do? Because that's all we got, right? When you start looking at people with demographics, it leads automatically to stereotypes. The other thing we love asking questions about in those surveys is about our product, our service. Like, how much do you love us? Do you love us lots and lots and lots? Would you refer us to a friend? Where's some places we could get better? We talk about the product, but what we never ask is about them as humans. We never say, why do you go to work? You could put other questions in there, like, what's the thing that frightens you the most? What makes a day a good day for you? And the way to start asking those questions, which, as Michelle points out, are incredibly personal, is to just point to them and go, okay, this is a little unorthodox, but we want to understand who you are as people. So here's a series of questions. Don't feel like you have to answer them, but we'd really like to know you better. And so here's some questions that'll help us get to understand who you are so that we can do a better job of the job that we have in front of us. So I just call them out and say, we're just trying to get to know you. That's all we're doing here. It's just trying to understand what makes you tick. It's worked really well for organizations who've used it in the past.
Hey, Sharon had a great question. It's a question that I was thinking of in all the conversations. Like, how do you operationalize this? I mean, this is, we're for our companies. Like, I want to make better choices of who we award a franchise to, and I want to make better choices on where we place that store. And so right now we work on demographics and interviews on the quality, on the choices for the candidate. But looking at a market, if I'm going to look at it, I'll just pick two British Columbia, because that's where you're based. But like, do I go to Kelowna or do I go to Kamloops? Where do we put the store? And we can look at the data on population size, average household income, white to blue collar, education, sex, race. I mean, all the stereotype demographic data that who knows if 89.5% of those people match up with our system, right? I mean,
Yeah.
how do you operationalize that
Yeah.
for a
Well,
franchise system?
um, first off, I'm impressed that as an American that you knew two cities in BC that both started with the letter K. That was pretty impressive. Got a little alliteration in there too. Um, so the answer is you need to get your hands on some data. It's what my research company does. I don't want this to turn into a commercial, but what we would do in a case like that is we would go and profile the area that you're thinking about moving into. Let's British Columbia, let's say.
Yep.
We can zero in on a couple of cities if you want. We can even zero it into a neighborhood if you want, and say, okay, here's the shared values of the people in that particular geography. We would have pre-existingly done a study on the folks who are your biggest fans and your biggest customers and said, okay, well, now we can see, do these line up or don't they? If they do, to within what margin of error are we or disagreement of discohesion are we willing to accept? If the two of you did your values identifier, personal values assessments, you only have one value in common. So if we take that and put it out into a group perspective, the city you're thinking of moving into and what your brand seems to mean to people, there's only one value in common, then that's maybe not the best market to be thinking about moving into. And then in terms of choosing franchisees, it's interesting. I've had this conversation with a bunch of different people because here's how I understand the process. It's probably a little bit different for everybody, but either yourself or through some independent outside organization, a short list is developed, and you're down to like a few people that you're thinking about awarding the next franchise to. And there's a whole courtship ritual that you go through, and sometimes it involves even getting together and having a dinner and just trying to feel each other out and see how it's all coming along. What you're really trying to do is figure out whether their values align with the values of the organization. So, same approach. You'd have them fill out a values identifier as an individual and say, here's what their values are. And let's compare it to the values of the other folks who already are working here and who are already part of our work family and see if they're going to be a match or not. It's not always as obvious as the two of you, because just based on that one piece of information, you shouldn't even be friends. But if you look at what's behind all those values, I bet you see a whole lot of similarities in the definitions of those values and what those values mean to you. So there's going to be a lot of overlap there, or else, yeah, the two of you have just been faking it the whole time you've been friends and
Oh my
didn't
We
God.
haven't been taking
like
it.
each other
We
at
were
all.
shocked. We were shocked, but it
We
really
were a little,
does.
yeah, we were very surprised. Although it was a wonderful experience to go through and actually look at
So
the
the answer to
assessment.
your question is
Yeah.
we can lay the data on top of your existing systems and say, well, in addition to looking at demographics and psychographics, why not also look at value graphics and see what it tells you about whether or not this is the right market, or your marketing program, your franchise marketing program, the brand marketing, is it being pitched in the right direction to the folks who are actually the biggest fans of the brand? And is this the right person to come into, like, all of that stuff can be looked at through a values lens to see if there's alignment or if there isn't. Short of hiring my company to do all that work for you, again, this sounds like a sales pitch, but my book has a 15 question quiz in it. And just to be clear here, if you buy my book, Jeff Bezos uses most of the money to go and build another rocket, and I get about $1. So if each one of you buy a book, I'm going to have maybe enough for a sandwich at lunch today. It's not, this isn't about me getting rich. But in the book, there's a 15 question quiz. And if you administer that, it points you to one of 15 different chapters in the book where an archetype is unpacked. So the quiz will tell you for a group of people which archetype they're most similar to. And then you can go in there and get a little bit more information. So the three telltale questions that I gave you, that's like the most back of a napkin sketch kind of version. The 15 questions in the book, it's a little bit more accurate. If you work with my company, it ends up being academically precise. It's like, if you're a data geek, it's plus or minus 3.5% accurate, 95% level of confidence. It's like, it's more than you need for a PhD. So there's three different entry points depending on how much you want to get into this stuff.
Thank you.
So when you're working with a company and you're working with the marketing team, has the you've got this information, you're understanding the value message that the company wants and their customers want. Has it been more of a messaging change that they've had to adopt, or has it been more of a venue or a media change that has been most productive for those companies that have really implemented this and seen a strong ROI, or both?
It's all over the map. I mean, every organization has things they're trying to achieve. I've yet to run into an organization where we do this work and it touches everything inside the organization. It's usually you're coming in under human resources and workplace culture and employee engagement, or you're coming in under sales and marketing, or you're coming in under, the board of directors and setting strategy, and then from there, the hope is that they see how well this works and it starts to bloom out and impact other parts of the organization. But some examples. We've seen massive lifts in when fundraisers use this. A few different not-for-profits we've worked with where they implement some messaging tweaks in the way they talk to major gift donors, and suddenly the size of the gifts go up and the regularity of those gifts go up. We had one group we worked with who had set themselves a goal, a very aggressive goal of doubling the amount of money that was donated from major gift donors, and they had actually ended up quadrupling the amount of money that was donated from their major gift donors, because all of those donors got talked to in a way that felt like these people get me. They just have they know who I am, and why would I give my money anywhere else? Here's a good little story. I used to do a bunch of work with car dealerships back in the day before I got involved in this, and I would sometimes spend time on the showroom floor talking to the sales guys. And the good sales guys, they could tell within 10 seconds of somebody sitting behind the wheel of a car if they were going to buy it or not. Because this happened. They'd sit down behind the wheel of the car and they'd do this. Their values aligned with everything that they knew and could feel and all the cues about that car. And they were like, yeah, this is my car. This is the one for me. And then they'd ask questions about gas mileage and drivetrain warranties and all those kinds of things. So the values just made that in that 10 seconds, they were able to go, yeah, this is my car. So if you have the power to make those 10-second things happen with customers where they see an ad campaign or they walk into one of your franchisees and they look around and they're just like, yeah, this feels like the right place for me. That 10 seconds of just having that values alignment is what boosts trust, engagement, loyalty. Price, I should tell you those stats because they're fascinating. If you do the work of helping people see how you know who they are and you know what their values are, these are the averages we see. It's a little bit different for every industry, but on average, engagement goes up by 40%. Trust goes up by 20%, loyalty goes up by 20%, and what we call financial elasticity goes up by 12%. And so in the case of consumers, that means they will pay 12% more for whatever it is you're selling compared to a competitor if yours the place that just like, yeah, this is the one for me. It kind of fits here. This feels like the right fit. They'll pay 12% more because you would, wouldn't you? I mean, you think about yourself in some of these in a retail situation or looking at two cans of soup in the grocery store, and you'll pay a little bit more for the one that just kind of feels like, this is me, this is my brand, right? And in the case of employees, we're talking about workplace culture and those sorts of things. That 12% elasticity is I will accept 12% less in terms of my compensation to be in a place that gets me, that feels like I belong here. And when you know what people's values are, you can create that environment where they feel seen and heard in a very real data driven way. Did I answer the question? I went off there on a thing, and I don't
I
know
think
if I.
you did. It did remind me when you were talking about the person in the car, and this is anecdotal and it's not quantified, but we know we are talking to a Wild Birds Unlimited franchisee, and she said when a new customer comes in and when they say, I want to attract my cardinals, or if I want to attract my bluebirds, I know that if I can get them to join our loyalty club. I know that they're going to be a lifelong customer if I can connect them because they've already got that whole ownership and family side of their community. That's what they want is when they say my birds, not the birds, they they're in. If I do this right, I have a better opportunity.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, that's a great example. That's a great example. Um,
I wanted to maybe throw you a little bit of a curveball because it's something
okay.
that had been on my mind. But when we think about the work that the Pride Franchise Leadership Council is trying to do within the Diversity Institute of the IFA, what feels like happens a lot is that those who are aligned with our values and mirror some of the behaviors that we all have when it comes to the Diversity Institute tend to come to these events. They tend to want to be educated, want to push themselves outside of comfort zones, and maybe pursue things in a different way simply because their values are aligned. And those within the franchising community that might not have aligned values, or maybe their behavior reflects something that makes us think that we don't have aligned values, which I think might be the key. It feels like there's only so much work that we can do, and then you hit this wall of not being able to maybe change behaviors or minds or thoughts around what we are trying to do. And I'd be curious to understand from you what the best approach there is as we think about the work that we're trying to do within franchising. How do we find maybe that aligned value in a person that otherwise you would never think we
Right.
could have aligned values on and start either influencing or changing behavior or getting them to maybe see things a little bit differently if values never change and we have them from when we're basically born.
Yeah.
How can we start doing the work a little bit differently and think about what we're doing every
Yeah.
day differently?
Great question. And there's actually a very easy answer. Um, what's happening, what you're experiencing is you're trying to communicate and connect with these people based on the values that you think are important and that are working for you and that are part of the folks who are involved in the community right now. What you need to do is help them connect the dots to their values. And you need to be able to say, well, the reason you should do this, I'm just going to make stuff up. Let's say we find out that one of the values that's driving the folks who are least likely to be engaged in the work of the council and the committee, one of their overarching values is, I don't know, personal growth. Well, then what you need to do is say to them why behaving in a different way and accepting a new point of view is going to help them with their personal growth. What you've probably been saying to them hasn't been triggering that value, or they would have already gone, oh, actually, that sounds kind of interesting. So figuring out what makes them tick and why they haven't been paying attention so far, and then reorienting messages in a way that's aligned with what they think is most important. Like if the goal here is to get them to change behavior, then it can't be about what you think is most important. It has to be about what they think is most important. What matters, our little catchphrase is what matters most. So what matters most to them? And then once you know that, you can say, there's the sweet spot. We have to talk to them and put things together and strategies and policies and whatever in a way that's going to hit those things. And those aren't the things that matter most to us, but they're definitely the things that matter most to them.
I see Paul thinking, but I have a quick follow-up. In the same way that we don't want to assume all women that are our customers like the same things, want the same things, are driven by the same things. How do you, asking those questions is great, but how do you avoid risking assuming someone's values based on their behaviors to then kind of get in that back door and figure it out? Like, what's the best way to, I don't know, mentally screen someone without falling into that trap of, well, you align with these things, so this must be a value to you that you have in high
I don't think I
esteem.
understand your question. Come at it again.
What I'm trying to say is, how can we know someone's values without falling into that same trap of demographics? Unless they take an assessment, unless we get the point where we can ask them those three questions, what's the best way to kind of enter into a conversation and in an easier way for any of us in this room
Just
specifically?
kind of get a read on people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
without making assumptions because you're like, well, you do this or you say this or you're with this group of people, so you must value X, Y, and Z. Because
You
I
got a
think
map
that's
of
the
the
trap that we fall into.
you got a map of the world on the wall behind you.
I do.
Why is that?
Dang it, David. Because I enjoy the freedom that travel invokes.
So you do a lot of traveling.
I do.
That scarf you're wearing looks like it might be some a treasure you picked up from a trip.
It was a gift from a neighbor, and I keep it in my office to keep me warm.
Oh, nice. And tell me about the neighbor. Like, how did you get to know your neighbor?
My wife and I are very intentional about neighboring, and we think it's one of the most impactful ways we can be good humans to one another. So we know all of our neighbors and we have community get-togethers all the time, and it's just something we like to
Wow,
do.
that's phenomenal. And then you got a little cup or what's that darkish thing I can see in the bottom right-hand corner there? Is it like a little frame or a
Yep, it's a photo of my daughter when she was born, Maya.
oh, okay, so I mean, that was pretty surface level there. You'd only talk for a couple seconds, but family means a lot to you. So travel, that's about experiences and adventure and things like that. And I got loud and clear, not just community building, but also a kind of advocacy that's tied to that community building, that there's a sense of personal responsibility as a value around making sure that you're not hiding in the house and people are wondering what's going on with those two women and their kids in there. I'm going to say personal responsibility, experiences, and family are clearly high on your list. Now, I know you've done the values identifier, and I don't remember if those ones showed up or not, but that's far more scientific than what I just did. But to answer your question, that's what you do. You just talk
Mhm.
to people and ask them questions about themselves and say, "What's that ring? Oh, it's a beautiful ring. Can I see your ring?" And Paul, those are crazy glasses. They're big and it looks like tortoiseshell. And where'd you buy them? And just like talk to people and ask them about themselves, and they'll reveal that stuff. They
Yeah,
will.
that was amazing. Thank you for doing the live example. I think that was super helpful. And I think it reminds us that sometimes that's literally the easiest thing to do is just to notice the human in front of you in a more
Be
detailed
curious.
way than we tend to do in especially in business.
Yeah, it's something I've learned from my uh my I'm an indigenous man, but I'm very disconnected from my culture until the last 10, 15 years. So just trying to understand a little bit more about indigenous ways of moving through the world. And one of them is that, you go to meetings with indigenous communities and businesses, and you spend so much time just talking about your wife, your kids, like what's going on, and like how's this going, and then maybe the last 10 or 15% of the time you have together is about business. It's the inverse of what we do in the non-Indigenous community, where you spend 10 minutes going, "Oh, great, you had a weekend? It was a good weekend? Okay, cool. Let's get down to business." If we could just kind of flip that a little bit and spend just a bit more time actually caring about the other human in the room, not the job title who walked into the room, not the CV who walked into the room, but the human who walked into the room and say, how are you? How's your day? Oh, why is it like that? Oh, you're in a rush to where are you going? Oh, just like be curious. People will tell you what matters to them. And then you can start to understand how to frame things up in a way that relates that they're going to get because you know what they're listening for.
Crowd questions. Anybody, any attendees, anything you want? This is a great opportunity. We've got about 15 minutes left in our session, and I just want to make sure that everyone's feeling comfortable. They can just pop something into the
We
chat
did
if they have questions. My question is always about scaling this. Like okay, how do we scale this? How have you seen really companies who have embraced this and then pushed it down throughout their whole organization? What are the first couple of steps, David?
Well, first thing you got to do is get buy-in from some kind of champion inside the organization who's willing to invest some small p political capital and kind of go out on a limb a bit and go, I really believe in this and I think it's a smart way forward. So here's how we're going to start to introduce it into the organization. It depends on the organization. It depends on the people. I mean, I've worked with groups where the first thing they do after we do a study to understand customers or employees or whoever it is we're looking at, they'll bring me in and I'll get up and do a 1 hour, basically a keynote that's specific to the data that we found for them. And that's enough to get everybody excited. Maybe that's just with the leaders in the room. Another way that sometimes we do this is the personal values assessment tool that we have. So we have the ability to profile the values for large groups of people and for one person at a time. If you give that to your board of directors and you have a board development session around showing them what their values are and the surprise some of them have about what's really driving them, it's a pretty powerful way to get buy-in at the very top of an organization, and then they start to see, wow, this could really impact whatever the board happens to be focused on. Maybe it's a board that's more focused on sales and growth, so it's the first place it goes into the organization is through the sales channels. Um, yeah, every situation is a little different. Right down into a personal level, though, for just you, if you're not going to try and impact your entire organization, a really good thing to do is as you get more and more clues from these three telltale questions or the 15 questions in the book or anything else you can find that just helps you understand what's driving people, just put them on a sticky note on the side of your computer screen. You'll have a little list there of words like maybe, personal growth and ambition. And if you want the list of all 56 values, there's one on my website you can download. It's davidallisoninc.com and /resources. And there's a bunch of stuff there. You can take all of it if you want. But one of the documents there is the 56 values. So that's kind of a good starting point. And then if you're starting to see over time that these 3 or 4 values tend to be the ones that seem to keep coming up as the more you think about this, put a little sticky note on the side of your computer and then just experiment with it. Like every time you answer an email, see if you can make it about one of those things. See if you can frame up all your messages about one of those things or two of those things. Um, and yeah, that's some easy ways to start. A good way to help you understand your own values, a nice little hack there, other than doing the big, survey, is to this is a fun thing to do actually. Over the course of the next month, I want you to look at all of the blank spaces on your calendar, the unprogrammed times you have during the workday and during your personal life as well, and keep track of what you choose to do during
Mm.
those unprogrammed times. That'll start to show you what really matters to you. When you make time to go to the gym instead of something else, or you make time for hanging out with your friends instead of going to the gym, it starts to tell you what matters most to you when you get to make the call in your precious moments of unprogrammed time. The other thing I want to do, I don't know if any of you or all of you were at the Faegre Summit, but I want to show you the data we pulled for that. If I can figure out how to just quickly share my screen here. Someone has to allow me. I
Yeah,
just sent
David.
in.
David Smith just made you a co-host, so you should be able to share.
Okay, cool. Let's go look at this. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Um, you all disappeared, so I don't know where you went, but I'm glad you can see it. So this is the chart. I won't give you the whole keynote, but when we profiled people who are loyal franchise customers, they know they're going to a franchise, they like going to a franchise, they're perfectly thrilled that they're part of something that has some sense of regularity for them wherever it is they travel. And we compare them to the general population of the United States. There are three values that really over-index in an interesting way: loyalty, personal responsibility, and friendships. So there's a starting point for you as you start thinking about if you're thinking about outward facing audiences. Now that's all franchise customers for all brands across the entire country. So it's a pretty big, it's like we're talking about all kinds of dogs. And you are only interested in Chihuahuas, but they'll be in there somewhere. So, as opposed to using nothing to understand franchise customers, if you start just thinking about loyalty, personal responsibility, and friendship, then you're headed in the right direction. In fact, if you want me to send this chart to you, I'm happy to do that. Just pop me an email or connect with me on email would be best. It's david@valuegraphics.com, and I'll send you this chart. And I'll put a little package of other good stuff together that might help you with this as well.
And I know while we wait to see if anyone has any more questions, you just had a personal experience.
Oh yeah.
Paul and I both took the values identifier assessment, which was so interesting, and especially comparing the results was so interesting. But then you recently discovered something about yourself that you were sharing on the beginning of the call. If you're willing to share and get a little vulnerable, we'd love for you to share that story with the group.
Okay, jacket comes off for this one. Um, Yeah, so I have a coach, and we've been going through the results of the values identifier, which is the personal values assessment tool that we have. And something came up this last session, which was on Tuesday, a couple of days ago, that kind of brought me to the edge of tears. With my coach, I was talking about why am I not as productive as I would like to be. And one of the behaviors I was engaging in was I have, my time blocks are set up on my calendar, but then I move them around. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm moving over here. No, I'm going to put that over tomorrow. And I don't force myself to follow the structure of the day that I've set up for myself. And so we started talking about where's that coming from, and it links back to one of my values, which is independence. That I don't want my calendar bossing me around. And my calendar says, this is the hour you're going to do emails. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not. I'm going to watch this. I'm going to do it here. I'm just not going to do them at all. And so then we started going a little deeper. It's like, well, why are you behaving that way? Where does that independence value come from? And we got back to my childhood being gay and hiding and feeling like I had no control over my life at all. I had to be someone else. I had to be some version of myself that my parents would accept and that my friends at school would accept. And I had no control at all during my socialization period when that value of independence was formed. I was craving the ability to just be real and be in charge of myself and be my own boss. And so that independence value just like it calcified. And it's my independence that's not allowing me to follow the rules on the calendar. But wow, when we figured that out, it was like, holy smokes, this trauma, this childhood trauma that many of us have still carrying around and probably will to the day we die is impacting my productivity. There's a direct link there. And it just became so obvious that I don't know if it's just some sort of a halo effect of having that emotional moment and figuring this out with my coach, but I have to tell you, the last couple of days have been a lot more productive. I haven't been moving things around as much. I've been a little bit more able to just realize that these structures aren't here to control me. These structures that I've put in place are so that I can control the work, that
Mhm.
I'm the one who's calling the shots here. And it's not my calendar bossing me around, it's me bossing my life around. So, yeah, that was pretty intense. But that's, I mean, take that and blow that out and say, those are the sorts of insights you end up getting about yourself or about your customers or about the folks who come to work for you. And if you can get to that level of understanding about why they're doing the things they're doing and how you can help them find that values alignment, you get those breakthroughs like that where suddenly it's like, oh, wow, it's so clear. This is what we need to be doing. This is what we need to be saying. This is how we need to change our customer journey. This is how we need to think about bringing new franchise partners into the organization. It just suddenly like it's like what's the old line? The scales fall from your eyes, which I don't know even know what that means, but it's a thing we say, right? I don't know that I've had scaly eyes, but anyway,
I
that's my
I
point.
love that. And I think when going through the assessment myself and then seeing what came up as my top values, I was certainly surprised by some, but the more I dug into it, I feel like it started to align in the same way that anytime you do some kind of like personality assessment or you figure out what your Enneagram is or you know what your Myers-Briggs is, that you start to see how it aligns with other spaces in your life. And a couple of them, I love that the assessment, when you get it done, it tells you what people have told us about how this value shows up in their life. And there's a bunch of phrases. And I think that's where, Paul, maybe you had the same thing, but that's where I started to be like, oh, yeah, of
Yeah.
course, that's one of my values. That's exactly how I feel about the world or things that I say to myself. And it started to align with a lot of the other like personal or professional assessments that I think all of us have taken at some point in our career.
Oh
Where you're
yeah.
like, oh, that's the E in my Myers-Briggs, or that's the intuition that I value. So it was really interesting to see how it kind of enmeshed with other places. Um,
Yeah,
I
I actually
also,
literally said that evening when I got home, I'm like, oh, this kind of explains the why
yeah,
behind these other assessments. And that's
Yeah.
hello, that's what values are. It's
So
the why. It's the
so
choices we make.
So for the two of you, because you've done this, if anybody else wants to do it, I invite you to go and try it out. It's valuesidentifier.com. It's not my company. It's a company that's licensed the data from my company, but definitely I'm a supporter of what they do. But now that you have your reports, here's a cool thing to do. Take the values, and you know how they each one tells you what some of your blind spots might be. Because this
Yeah.
is driving you so much, you might sometimes not be paying attention to this, this, and this, right? Take that stuff, scrape it out of there, put it into ChatGPT. Ask ChatGPT to turn it into a narrative. So it's like a story that you can tell yourself about yourself. And then there's this app that one of my young friends put me onto. It's called Speechify. And what Speechify does is you take text, you put it in there, and then it will read whatever you put in there. It'll read it to you. And so you can choose voices. So for me, every morning, Barack Obama reminds me what is going on in my life that day, what my values are, and what I need to be careful to watch for. And I don't listen to all of what he has to say. As much as I love his voice, he could read me the phone book. But every day, something as I finish, this is while I'm doing my stretching, having my first cup of coffee, I'm listening to this thing. And every day, something is like more important and kind of sits up here. And then as I go and do my work, that for some reason seems to be the thing that I needed to hear that day.
Mm.
So it's a really good kind of way to bring those things into a daily practice.
Yeah,
What
and I
does it
think
say when my whole thing talked about my lack of ability to manage boundaries? For those of you in the audience who are, I can see two of my good friends bursting out laughing.
Well, it's telling you some truths
Not a
about
shock.
yourself, right? It's
Yeah.
telling you some
And
truths about
is
yourself.
Selena Gomez an opportunity on Speechify? Because I could listen to her read the phone book every day too. So
for one final question that came up in the chat that I don't think we addressed that I think is really interesting is when we look at demographics, we sometimes look at psychographics as kind of like, well, let's color in some of the lines with these psychographics. Talk to us about the difference if we're thinking about the data that we have access to. We have demographics, we have these psychographics,
Yeah.
and now we have these values. How
Yep.
do they differ from one another? And what do you think either all three of them or none of them can point us in the right direction when it comes to just like our brands, our employees, our potential
Yeah.
franchise owners, our
Yeah.
customers.
The truth is, all three makes a three-legged stool, which is international hand sign for three-legged stool. It's a very sturdy place to stand. Two legs, not so much. So demographics really good at putting a fence around a group of people and saying, here's what they are. Here's what we know about them. They're all the demographic labels that we're familiar with. So that's cool. But what we've been doing wrong with that is saying that now that we know what their demographics are, we also know who these people are. And we can't do that.
Mhm.
Because it just doesn't work. We've talked about that already. Psychographics, second leg of the stool. That's all the other stuff we know about people that isn't demographics. Everything from our CRM systems, our employee databases, our other studies about brand preferences and personalities and behaviors and all that kind of stuff. That's all cool, but it's all data from the past because we know it. We wrote it down. We can talk about it. It's historical, even if it's a click study on your website that happened 2 seconds ago. That's 2 seconds ago. And what we're all trying to do is figure out how to get people to change behaviors in the future.
Mhm.
So using data from the past, you can see some patterns in there that might be useful. But if you're trying to change something, you got to know why will people change? And that's the value graphics. So demographics describe, psychographics are a record, and
Mhm.
value graphics are influence. So demographics describe, psychographics record or a record, and then value graphics are the influencing data that you need.
That's amazing. I want to make sure people can get in touch with you. So I've dropped some resources in the chat. You can find David on LinkedIn, on his website. I'll make sure you all have his contact information as well. Please stay up to date on all things Pride Franchise Leadership Council by following our LinkedIn page. We try and do a really good job of just letting you all know what's going on. And we will send the recording out to not just all of you, but everyone who wasn't able to join us today. And we'll be posting throughout the rest of the year just snippets of David and his wise words during the webinar as well. Go ahead.
Um, uh, David at valuegraphics.com. If you want that chart, just drop me a note and I'll send you that. And I'll also send you the toolkit we put together for the Fegri Drinker Summit. So a bunch of
Yeah,
information you can have.
thank
I'll
you.
follow up in just a massive email and make sure everyone has all that information as well.
Cool.
Perfect.
Thank you,
Big
David.
thank you to
Thanks
the
everyone who was able
IFA,
to
to the
join.
foundation. David, Patty, thank you so much. This was wonderful. We're very excited. Reminder to everybody, emerging franchise store conference. Sign up now. It's a wonderful conference. Thank you all.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Jazz hands.
Stars, rock stars, jazz hands, yep, all that.